At 3:13 a.m., most people are asleep, deep in the kind of silence where even the air feels like it's holding its breath. But that quiet moment, the kind that usually passes unnoticed, became the center of a mystery no one was supposed to uncover. It began with a piece of footage, shaky, grainy, barely a few minutes long. A video that surfaced online for less than an hour before they removed it. Not reported, not flagged or erased. As if someone didn't just want it hidden. They wanted it forgotten. But the internet never forgets. Not really. I first heard about the footage from a friend who worked night shifts in the editing room of a small local news station. He wasn't the kind of guy who's scared easily. He'd seen accidents, police body cam files, security footage from crime scenes. Things most people shouldn't see. But that night, he called me sounding different. Breathless. Off. Almost whispering. He kept repeating one thing. Whatever you do, don't watch it alone. At first, I thought he was joking. Another late-night prank. But then he sent me a download link and told me to open it quickly before they took it down. He wouldn't say who they were. And every time I pressed him, he just said, people who know more than we do. I didn't believe him at first. But the way he said it, it didn't feel like fear. It felt like warning. When I finally opened the file, it didn't look like anything special. Just a regular clip from a street camera. A quiet road somewhere outside the city. A parked car. A set of apartments in the background with only one window lit. Nothing unusual. Nothing strange. But the timestamp at the bottom, 3:13 a.m., was the first thing that stood out. The second thing was the audio. Or, rather, the lack of it. There was no wind. No passing car. No distant hum of traffic. Just absolute silence, like the microphone wasn't recording. Or like the world itself had muted for a moment. And then something happened. A flicker in the footage. Not like a glitch, more like the camera blinked. For a second, everything went dark, and when the picture returned, the car that had been parked on the side of the road was gone. Not driven away. Not shown leaving. Just gone. I remember leaning closer to the screen, thinking maybe the clip had jumped. Maybe it was corrupted. But the timestamp was still running smoothly. No skip. No break. No cut. 1 second the car was there. The next it wasn't. The street looked normal. The shadows, the lamppost, the building. Nothing changed. Except the car. My friend called again while I was still staring at the screen. Did you see it? He asked. Did you see the moment it disappeared? I said yes, and he let out a shaky breath, almost like he'd been waiting for someone else to confirm it. That's not even the worst part, he whispered. Keep watching. So I did. Another minute passed. The camera didn't move. Nothing unusual. Then the light in the apartment window flickered. Once. Twice. And then it turned off. Then the footage glitched again, but only for a fraction of a second. This time the street looked wrong. The shadows were longer. The lamppost light looked dimmer. And something stood in the middle of the road. It wasn't clear. It wasn't even shaped like anything I could recognize. But it was tall. Still. And almost leaning forward, like it was listening for something. The frame went black again. When it came back, the street was empty. I paused the video. Not because I was scared, at least that's what I told myself, but because the clip didn't feel like something I should watch in the dark. I turned on my room light, sat back down, and pressed play again. That's when the video cut to a different angle. A closer security camera from the other end of the road. It showed a small alleyway beside the apartment building. Empty at first. Then the same flicker. Then something slid across the ground. Not walked. Not ran. Slid. As if it wasn't touching the ground at all. I froze. My friend wasn't kidding. There was something deeply wrong with what I was watching. Not supernatural. Not necessarily paranormal. Just wrong in a way the human brain isn't built to understand. When the clip finally ended, the timestamp still read 3:13 a.m. Like the entire recording, everything from the car disappearing to the shifting shadows happened in the same minute. As if time itself had stretched or folded or done something it shouldn't have. I messaged my friend immediately, asking where the footage came from, who recorded it, what had happened. But he didn't reply. I waited. and waited. 10 minutes later, the download link he'd sent me stopped working. Then it vanished completely. 15 minutes later, he called back. But this time it wasn't his usual number. It was a private line. A voice I didn't recognize answered, telling me the person I was trying to reach was unavailable. I asked what that meant. The voice hung up. From that moment on, nothing felt normal. I kept checking the video file on my computer, but it acted strangely. The thumbnail changed. The file size changed. At one point, the video refused to open at all, then randomly worked again. And then the strangest part. When I examined the timestamp more closely, frame by frame, the numbers weren't stable. They were shifting. Not forward, not backward, just shifting, like they were resisting being seen. I know it sounds crazy, like some glitch or corrupted data. But there's something else too, something that made me feel like I wasn't supposed to have the footage at all. Every time I watched it, I felt like something in the frame was watching me back. I tried to convince myself it was just paranoia, lack of sleep, the power of suggestion. But then something happened that I couldn't explain away. 3 nights later, also at 3:13 a.m., someone knocked on my door. Not loud, not violent, just slow, steady knocks, as if whoever was on the other side wasn't in a hurry. I didn't open it. I didn't even move. I just sat there in the dark, holding my breath, listening as the knocking continued. One knock every few seconds. Calm. Patient. Too patient. The next morning, I checked the security camera outside my home. And the footage from 3:13 a.m. was missing. Not corrupted. Not blacked out. Missing. Like the system itself refused to record that minute. That's when I realized something. Whatever was in that original video, whatever my friend had tried to warn me about, wasn't gone. It wasn't erased. It was just moving. And it wasn't limited to the footage anymore. Since that night, I've been trying to piece together what happened. Why the footage was taken down. Why the street looked different. Why the shadows changed shape. And what exactly stood in the middle of that road, waiting, listening. Some people online say it was a glitch in the camera. Others say it was someone messing with the files. But only a few, claim they saw the same thing. That they watched the video before it was erased, even for a moment. And all of them described the same detail. They didn't notice the figure at first. It only becomes clear the more times you watch the footage. Almost like it's getting closer. Almost like it wants to be seen. And every single person who viewed the video claims the same thing happened afterward. They started waking up at exactly 3:13 a.m., without an alarm, without noise, without reason. Just awake, like something was calling them, or checking if they were still there. And the deeper I look, the more I realize this wasn't just some random moment caught on a street camera. This wasn't some internet hoax. This wasn't an accident. The footage wasn't removed because it was fake. It was removed because it wasn't. And the strangest part, the part one still can't explain, is that in the last few seconds of the clip, right before the video cuts out completely, there's a single frame that almost looks like a message. Not written, not spoken, just there, a shape, a pattern, almost like a face, but not human. I don't know what it means. I don't know why it showed up. And I don't know what happened to my friend who sent the footage in the first place. But one thing I do know, nothing recorded at 3:13 a.m. is normal. Not anymore. Because the footage they tried to erase wasn't just a mistake. It was a warning. And I think it wasn't meant for him. It was meant for me. Or maybe for anyone who keeps watching. After that night, I started noticing small things, little shifts in my routine that didn't make sense. I'd wake up with my phone's flashlight turned on, even though I never touched it. My laptop would be open when I was sure I'd shut it down. The hallway light, which had been flickering for weeks, suddenly worked perfectly. It was like my surroundings were rearranging themselves piece by piece, almost like someone wanted me awake, aware, paying attention. I kept telling myself it was stress, that the video had gotten into my head. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. It wasn't just me losing sleep. It felt like something around me was adjusting, getting ready for something, like a slow preparation. The next morning, I finally tried calling my friend again. His number didn't ring. Didn't even go to voicemail. Just an automated message saying the line was no longer in service. It didn't make sense. People don't change numbers overnight, at least not without telling someone. And he definitely wouldn't have ignored messages like that. Not him. Not after sounding so scared. I drove to the station where he worked, hoping maybe he'd be on shift or maybe someone there knew something. But when I got there, the receptionist looked confused when I said his name. "He hasn't shown up for 3 days," she said, tapping her pen on the counter. "He didn't mention taking time off." I told her no, and she frowned. Well, nobody said anything. One day, he was here. Next day, nothing. I asked if he'd left anything behind. A bag. A note. Anything. She shook her head. I checked his desk myself. It was completely clean. Too clean, honestly. That word stuck with me. Too clean. Like someone didn't just remove his things. They removed any trace he'd been there at all. Before I left, she lowered her voice and said something that bothered me long after. "Just, if he contacts you, tell him to come back. People don't just disappear like that." I didn't know what to say, because the more I thought about it, the more I realized that's exactly what was happening. People don't just vanish. Footage doesn't just erase itself. Timestamps don't shift on their own. Yet everything connected to that night at 3:13 a.m. seemed to slip out of normal explanations, like I was dealing with something that didn't want to follow the rules of the real world. When I got home, I opened the file again, hoping maybe I'd missed something the first time. But now the video felt even stranger. The colors looked different, almost washed out, like the world inside the frame was fading. The shadows seemed longer. The street looked emptier. And the moment where the figure had appeared in the road, it lingered longer than I remembered. Almost like the frame refused to move on. I replayed that second again and again. There was something off about the way it stood there. Something about the angles. The way the light hit it. Or maybe the way the light didn't hit it at all. It didn't cast a shadow. Everything around it did, the lamppost, the cars, even the building. But not that shape. I tried to freeze the frame and zoom in, but every time I did, the picture distorted into static. The more I tried to focus, the harder it became to see anything clearly. It was like the camera didn't want me examining it. Or maybe the thing in the frame didn't want to be recognized. That night, I searched online for anything related to the footage. It didn't take long to figure out other people had heard about it too, although nobody had a full copy. Just screenshots, blurry clips, fragments posted on small forums and quickly taken down. Some users claimed their posts were deleted automatically. Others said their accounts were suspended. And a few people mentioned seeing the same shape in the road, though everyone described it differently. One person said it looked like a tall, thin figure leaning forward. Another said it looked more like a shadow that wasn't attached to anything. Someone else said it reminded them of a silhouette with no outline, which didn't make sense until I remembered how the thing didn't cast a shadow. But one comment stood out from the rest. A user said they recognized the street. They claimed the footage was recorded near Old Birch Road, a quiet neighborhood a few miles outside the city, known mostly for being empty at night. Nothing dangerous. Nothing unusual. Just another old, half-forgotten road people used to take shortcuts through. I drove there the next evening, not because I expected to find anything, but because I couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't just about a video. It was about a place. And maybe something happened there that wasn't supposed to be recorded. When I reached Old Birch Road, it looked almost exactly like the video. Same lamppost. Same narrow street. Same angle of the buildings. Even the apartment window that flickered in the footage was there, except now it was dark. I parked and walked a little, listening for anything out of the ordinary. But there was nothing. Just that heavy silence again, the same kind from the recording. No wind. No rustling trees. No distant car engines. Just stillness. A strange, heavy stillness. I checked the timestamp on my phone. 11:47 p.m. Still hours before the time shown in the video. I wasn't planning to stay until 3 a.m. I didn't want to be anywhere near that street at that hour. But something told me to keep looking. I walked down the path toward the alley shown in the second camera angle. It looked abandoned, with cracked pavement and weeds growing along the sides. Nothing moved, but the air felt thick, heavier than normal, like it was pressing against my skin. Then, just as I reached the end of the alley, my phone flashed. Not a call. Not a notification. It switched its clock to 3:13 a.m. for a split second. Then it jumped back to 11:48 p.m. I froze. My heart started racing. That wasn't something a phone should do, not with no alarms, no apps, no triggers. It was too specific, too precise, like a reminder or a warning. I walked back to my car quickly, trying not to panic. I wasn't imagining things. That timestamp wasn't just a number anymore. It was following me, showing up in places it shouldn't. And the closer I got to the area shown in the footage, the more the world around me seemed to slip out of sync. Before I drove away, I looked at the apartment one last time. For a moment, just a moment, I thought I saw the light flicker in the same window from the video. One quick dim, then another, then darkness again. I didn't wait for anything else. I got in my car and left, watching the road behind me in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something step into the middle of the street the way it did in the footage. When I finally got home, I checked the video again. This time, something was different. A new glitch. A brief, warped moment that hadn't been there before. In the reflection of the apartment window, something moved. Slowly, carefully, like it had been waiting for me to notice. And that's when I understood something I hadn't realized before. The footage wasn't changing randomly. It was changing because I was watching it. And whatever was in that video was paying attention to me too. The next few days felt strange, like my life had slipped a few inches out of alignment. Things still looked the same on the surface, same routine, same streets, same sky. But underneath it all, there was this constant tension, a quiet pressure, like something was waiting for the right moment to show itself again. I kept trying to ignore it, but the more I tried to go back to normal, the more I felt the video pulling me in. I didn't want to keep watching it. I didn't want to think about the figure on that street, or the shifting timestamp, or the weird silence around Old Birch Road. But the mystery kept growing. There were too many pieces missing, too many questions that didn't fit anywhere. And the biggest of them all, what happened to my friend, hung over everything like a shadow that wouldn't move. On the third night, I finally decided to check the footage frame by frame again. I slowed it down until each second turned into a series of still images. At first, everything looked the same, the quiet street, the parked car, the empty sidewalk. But when I got to the moment right before the car disappeared, I noticed something different. In one frame, the car was there. In the next, it wasn't. But in the background, deep in the shadows, near the apartment building, something else shifted. Something I hadn't seen before. It wasn't clear, more like a blurry outline, almost like a ripple passing through the air. It reminded me of heat waves rising from pavement, except it wasn't warm outside that night. And this ripple seemed to bend the light around it, like it was distorting everything behind it. I stared at it for minutes, trying to understand what I was seeing. It wasn't a person. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't even shaped like anything familiar. But the more I looked, the more I felt that same sensation I'd felt the night I first watched the clip, like something in the footage wasn't meant for a camera. Something that wasn't supposed to be seen. The next frame showed nothing, just the normal street again, but I couldn't unsee it. That strange distortion, that thing lurking in the edges. I tried searching online for anything about distortions caught on camera, keywords like unexplained camera ripple, shadow distortion, security camera anomaly. Most results were people talking about glitches, compression errors, optical illusions. But a few posts from older forums mentioned something else. Something people called frame interference. Most of the posts were vague, written years apart by users who never replied again. They talked about cameras capturing things that weren't present in the visible spectrum. Things that only showed up in brief moments. Things that didn't line up with natural movement. Words like anomaly, signal bleed, presence. And one phrase that repeated a few times. Seen between moments. It sounded like nonsense, but part of me couldn't shake the feeling it meant something. One comment, posted by someone with a deleted account, said something that chilled me. If you see it once, you open a path. If you see it twice, it sees you too. I closed the tab immediately. That night, I started sleeping with the lights on. Not because I was scared of the dark, but because the dark now felt like the place where the unexplained lived. The kind of dark that didn't feel empty anymore. I tried avoiding the footage for a day, but something always pulled me back. Not curiosity, more like pressure. Like the story wasn't finished with me. And whatever the main conflict was, it was only starting to unfold. The next time I opened the file, something new had appeared. A small detail. A flicker in the corner of the screen. A reflection in a window that hadn't been there before. At first, it just looked like a streak of light. But when I paused it at the exact millisecond, I saw something that made my stomach drop. In the glass of the apartment window, there was a shape. Faint, blurred, almost like the reflection of someone standing behind the camera. But that made no sense. The camera was mounted high on a pole, pointing down at the street. No one could stand behind it. But the reflection was there. Slight, human-shaped, facing the camera. I didn't know what to make of it. Was someone there the night of the recording? Did the camera catch a second angle without meaning to? Or was the video changing again, adding pieces each time I watched it? If it was just a glitch, it should have appeared randomly. But it didn't. It appeared exactly at the moment when the timestamp flickered. Exactly when the distortion first appeared. Almost like a sequence. At this point, part of me wondered if this was the reason the footage got erased. Not because of the disappearing car or the strange shape in the road, but because someone or something else was there. Something watching. Something present at the exact second reality bent. I tried contacting my friend again, even though his phone was disconnected. I called old numbers he'd used years ago. Nothing. It wasn't like him to disappear this long. If he was scared, he would have told me. If he was in trouble, he would have reached out. Unless he couldn't. Or unless someone didn't want him to. Over the next 2 days, the video started behaving differently. Sometimes it wouldn't play unless the room was quiet. Other times it froze at the same frame, the one where the figure stood in the road. And a couple times, the file thumbnail changed again. At first, it was the street. Then it became static. Then once it turned into a dark, grainy image that almost looked like an eye. It vanished the moment I moved my mouse. I wasn't sleeping well anymore. Every night, I woke up around the same time. Not exactly 3:13 a.m., but close, 3:11, 3:12, 3:14. Always in that same quiet window of the night. The air always felt still, like something was waiting for the exact minute to settle. But the worst part wasn't the video. It wasn't the strange reflections or the distortion. It was that I wasn't the only one experiencing it. A user online posted that they saw the reflection too. Another said their video file also changed. And someone else, who lived 2 states away, claimed they woke up to find their window open at exactly 3:13 a.m., even though they never open it. Different people, different places, but the same minute, the same strange distortions, the same feeling of being watched. It was becoming clear that whatever this was, it wasn't just a glitch in a forgotten piece of footage. It wasn't just something strange caught on camera. It was bigger, something connected, something that didn't stay in the video, something that followed the people who viewed it. And I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pulled deeper into the center of something I didn't understand. A conflict I couldn't name yet. Something that stretched beyond a missing friend, a quiet street, or a strange figure in the footage. Something that wasn't finished with me. Not even close. By the time a week had passed, the line between what was real and what was connected to the footage had started to blur in ways I couldn't ignore anymore. Every night felt heavier than the last. Every hour past midnight carried that quiet pressure that made the house feel like it was holding its breath. I kept telling myself I just needed sleep, but sleep became the hardest thing to reach. There was always this feeling that if I closed my eyes at the wrong moment, I'd wake up to something standing too close. The strange part was how normal everything looked during the day. The sunlight made the memories of the footage feel distant, almost exaggerated, like I was just scaring myself. But as soon as the light faded, the tension returned. It wasn't fear exactly, more like expectation. Like the night itself was waiting for something to line up perfectly. One evening I sat in front of my laptop, staring at the paused frame of the video. The figure standing in the street. The empty road behind it. The static around its shape that seemed to pulse if I looked too long. I didn't even hit play. I just watched it still, like I was waiting for it to move on its own. That was when I noticed something new. Not in the figure. Not in the street. In the background, near the apartment window, where the faint reflection had appeared, something shifted. Just a flicker, barely noticeable. But enough. When I zoomed in, the pixels warped again, like the footage was hiding something deeper beneath the surface. The window seemed slightly open now, even though in the original clip, it had been fully shut. Why would it change? Why would the smallest detail slowly adjust itself with each viewing? Unless the video wasn't showing what had happened, but what was happening now. Almost like a delayed signal. A delayed presence. I checked the file details again. The last modified date had changed. Not the first time. But now the timestamp said it was altered 2 minutes ago. I hadn't touched the file in 2 minutes. I disconnected the laptop from the internet, turning off Wi-Fi entirely. I didn't want anything remotely close to a sync or update happening. The file shouldn't be able to change without someone opening it. But the system was treating it like a living thing, constantly renewing, shifting, aligning itself. Around midnight, my phone lit up again. No notification, no sound, just the screen turning on by itself. The clock read 3:13 a.m. But it wasn't 3:13 a.m. Not even close. I watched the numbers stare back at me until the screen dimmed and locked again. When I tapped it, the time went back to normal. I realized then that it wasn't just the footage trying to show me something. It was the time connected to it. That specific minute, 3:13 a.m., kept pulling at everything around me. Phones, laptops, clocks, even my sleep. And each time it appeared, something else in the video changed. The next night, I decided to message one of the people online who claimed their version of the footage also kept updating. Their username was simple, like a throwaway, Frame Watcher. When they replied, it was short, almost nervous. Yours too. I asked what they meant. They said their file opened at 3:13 a.m. without them touching it. Another time, the lights in their hallway flickered right when the figure in the video appeared. And the last update said something that made my chest tighten. The reflection in my window looked like someone standing in my room. I didn't reply for a while. My hands shook a little, but I tried to keep calm. I asked them if they ever found out where the footage originally came from. They said they heard rumors, something about a failed investigation, a corrupted data set, a recording that wasn't meant to be released publicly. Everything vague, scattered, impossible to verify. But one detail matched what I'd already experienced. They said the footage was tied to a location, a place where things didn't move normally, a place known for strange silence and odd electrical issues. Old Birch Road. I didn't know how to respond. It felt like every path kept leading me back to the same street, the same minute, the same impossible moment caught on camera. Later that night, I couldn't sit still. I kept pacing around the room, feeling something building, like a storm without sound. The kind of pressure that makes your ears ring even when the air is still. I knew what the story wanted, what the conflict was pushing me toward, but I wasn't ready to face it. Still, I took my keys. I didn't know if I was going back to Old Birch Road to find answers, or to prove to myself that the footage wasn't controlling me. Maybe I just needed to see the street again while the tension was at its peak. Maybe I needed to see if the world outside shifted the same way the video did. The closer I got, the quieter everything became. The roads were empty, the houses unlit. Even the streetlights seemed dimmer than usual, like they were deliberately lowering themselves to match the tone of the footage. When I turned onto Old Birch Road, every muscle in my body tightened. It looked exactly the same angle, the same lamppost, the same hollow air as the recording. I parked and stepped out, leaving the door open behind me without realizing. I stood there in the middle of a road, listening. No wind, no cars, no distant noise. Just that same heavy silence that felt unnatural. Too perfect. I walked slowly toward the apartment building, my eyes drifting to the window that always changed in the footage. And for the first time, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Someone had recently opened it. Not wide, just a crack. Enough to show the latch was turned the wrong way. Enough to make the silence feel watched. My phone vibrated suddenly, even though the sound was off, and it was on Do Not Disturb. The screen lit up. 3:13 a.m. Except it wasn't. Not yet. Not even close. A faint reflection appeared in the phone screen, behind me. I turned slowly, my heart racing so fast I could feel it in my throat. The street was empty. No movement. No figure. No silhouette. But the light from the lamppost flickered once. Then again. Then the third time. And, on the fourth flicker, the world felt like it paused. Like the second right before something steps into view. Like the moment right before something crosses from one frame into the next. I didn't see anything yet, but I knew something was there, waiting, aligning itself with that exact second, that exact minute that kept following me. The air thickened. The light bent slightly. My phone screen glowed brighter than it should have. It was leading up to something. Something I could feel, but not see. Something the footage had been trying to warn me about from the beginning. And something I wasn't sure I could walk away from this time. The moment Ethan realized the symbols on the board were reacting to him wasn't the moment he felt fear. It was the moment he felt watched. The last thing he saw before the camera battery died was his own reflection in the dark classroom window. Except it wasn't exactly his reflection. The face staring back had the same outline, the same jaw, but the eyes were faintly glowing, almost as if they were lit from behind. When the screen went black, the silence inside the abandoned building suddenly felt alive, as if the air itself was waiting for him to move. He stood still for several seconds, barely breathing, listening for anything, a footstep, a breath, a whisper, anything that might explain what he had just seen. But the hallway remained empty. The only sound was the faint hum of the old lights overhead, flickering on and off like something was draining the power. Ethan swallowed hard and backed away from the window, his footsteps slow and careful. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he didn't want to attract attention from whatever else had been lurking in that dark reflection. He reached for his phone, but the screen wouldn't turn on. It wasn't dead, it wasn't even glitching. It was like the device refused to respond, as if something around him was blocking it. He shook it, tapped it, held the power button. Nothing. The school had no signal in most areas anyway, but this time it felt different. It felt intentional. The strange symbols on the classroom board still glowed faintly behind him, pulsing like a heartbeat. He tried not to look back, but it was impossible. Something about the markings had changed again. The shapes were the same, but now they were arranged in a way that almost resembled a message. Lines connecting lines. Circles overlapping. It felt like they were trying to show him something, almost guiding him toward an idea he couldn't quite understand yet. A soft thud echoed from the hallway, not loud, but close. Too close. Ethan pressed himself against the wall and held his breath. His mind raced through every possibility. Maybe it was just a loose door, maybe it was an animal, maybe someone else had come inside to explore. But deep down, he knew none of those explanations fit. Not after everything he had already seen. Not after the footage that started at 3:13 a.m. Not after the way the air shifted whenever he got near those symbols. Another sound followed, this time like a slow drag, as if something heavy was being pulled across the floor. His heartbeat started pounding against his ribs, loud enough that he was afraid something might hear it. He peeked around the corner to scan the hallway, but it was still empty. The lights flickered again, longer this time, plunging the corridor into complete darkness for several seconds. When they came back on, Ethan froze. Halfway down the hall, a door that had been closed earlier was now wide open. He stared at it, unable to look away. A faint glow came from inside the room, not bright, not natural, more like light reflecting off something metallic or wet. He didn't want to go near it. Every part of him was warning him to stay away. But with the hallway behind him silent and the exit seeming farther away than ever, he felt trapped. For a moment, he considered leaving the building altogether, just abandoning the investigation, the story, the footage, everything. But then he remembered why he came in the first place. The missing caretaker. The clip recorded at 3:13 a.m. that shouldn't exist. The way the figure in the video had moved through this exact hallway like it knew the place by memory. And now Ethan was standing in the same spot, facing the same shadows. He took a slow step forward. Then another. The open door felt like a mouth waiting to swallow whatever approached. As Ethan got closer, the faint glow inside shifted, dancing across the walls. For a second, he thought he heard quiet whispering coming from the room, but the closer he got, the more it blended into a low, steady vibration, almost like the building itself was breathing. He reached the doorway and hesitated. The room beyond was almost empty, except for a long desk pushed against the wall and something sitting on top of it. A black recorder, old, dusty, the kind used decades ago. But it was on. A tiny red light blinked in the dark. Ethan stepped inside. The door slammed behind him. He spun around, panic grabbing his chest, but the door wouldn't budge no matter how hard he pulled. The red light on the recorder blinked faster now, like it sensed he was there. Hesitant, he pressed play. At first, all he heard was static. Then a faint sound came through, distant footsteps, slow and deliberate. Then a low voice, distorted and broken, but still understandable. "Don't let it see you." Ethan felt the temperature shift in the room. His skin prickled. The lights in the hallway outside flickered again, casting strange shadows through the small window in the door. The recorder crackled, and the voice returned, this time clearer, almost urgent. "It's drawn to movement, drawn to sound, drawn to you." Ethan stumbled back, his breathing shaky. Before he could process the message, something faint tapped against the hallway floor outside. Tap, tap, tap. Slow. Measured. Getting closer with each step. He pressed himself against the far wall of the room, his eyes locked on the small window in the door. A shadow slid across it, long, distorted, and somehow bending in ways a human shape shouldn't. Ethan covered his mouth, terrified that even breathing too loudly would give him away. The tapping stopped right outside. The recorder clicked again, as if responding to the silence. You can't outrun it. Ethan shut his eyes, praying the shadow would move on, but instead it lingered, hovering just beyond view. The air felt heavy, charged, like the atmosphere before a storm breaks. Ethan didn't dare move. Seconds passed. Then minutes. It felt like forever. Then, just when he thought the thing outside the door had finally left, the recorder emitted one final message, spoken in a voice that froze his blood. A voice that sounded exactly like Ethan's. "Don't turn around." The lights flickered off, and the room went silent. Ethan didn't know how long the lights stayed off. It could have been seconds or minutes, but it felt like the whole building was holding its breath with him. He pressed his back against the cold wall, sliding down until he was almost sitting on the floor. His pulse hammered in his ears, and the darkness around him felt thick enough to touch. The last thing he had heard was his own voice coming from a recorder, even though he had never recorded anything on it. The warning echoed inside his head, "Don't turn around." He kept his face pointed toward the door, refusing to look anywhere else. The air behind him felt different, heavier, like someone was standing far too close. He squeezed his eyes shut, but that only made the sense of being watched worse. His breath trembled as he forced himself not to move. Every instinct said run, but his body stayed frozen. Then, slowly, the recorder clicked. A soft whirring sound followed, as if it was rewinding itself. The lights flickered weakly, trying to fight their way back on. When the faint glow returned, Ethan noticed something strange on the opposite wall. More symbols. But these weren't like the ones in the classroom. These were Messier, drawn in long, shaky strokes, as if someone had made them in a hurry. They stretched across the room in a looping spiral, ending right where Ethan sat. The moment the lights steadied, a quiet whisper brushed the back of his neck. "You were supposed to come sooner." Ethan sprang forward, spinning around before he could stop himself. But there was no one. Only the empty room, the recorder, and the symbols crawling across the walls like frozen waves. He backed toward the center of the room, his chest tight. For the first time, he wondered whether the voice wasn't coming from behind him at all, but from inside the room itself, as if the walls had trapped something that had finally found an audience. The recorder clicked again and began to play, not a warning, but the sound of someone breathing. Heavy, uneven breathing, like they had been running. Ethan's stomach clenched when he recognized it. It was his. A sudden knock slammed against the door, hard enough to rattle the glass panel. Ethan jumped back. Another slam followed, and this one was louder. Whatever had been tapping down the hallway before was no longer moving slow. It was pounding at the door like it knew exactly where he was and didn't tend to wait anymore. The lights flickered again, dimming with each strike. Ethan's eyes darted around the room, searching for anything he could use. The old desk, the recorder, the window. But the window was too small to crawl through and too high to reach. His mind raced. Another slam hit the door, this time cracking the lower corner. Ethan grabbed the recorder. If it had somehow caught his voice earlier, maybe it had caught something else, something he needed to hear. He pressed rewind and held it close, trying to ignore the door shaking behind him. The recorder clicked and began to play. Static. Then footsteps. Then a voice, his voice again, but this time it said something he had never said. You can stop it, but you have to show it the truth. The door rattled harder. The crack widened. Ethan didn't know what the truth meant, but he knew the symbols on the wall were the only thing in the room that felt connected to everything happening. Maybe they weren't a warning. Maybe they were instructions. He glanced at the recorder, then at the symbols, then at the door. The pounding grew so violent that dust shook loose from the ceiling. He stepped toward the wall, placing his hand on the largest symbol, the spiral that ended near the floor. The moment his palm touched it, the entire pattern pulsed with a faint glow. The same soft, unnatural light he had seen earlier in the classroom. The pounding on the door stopped. Silence washed through the hallway. Ethan's breath caught as the symbols shifted under his hand like warm ink. They swirled slowly, rearranging themselves, forming a shape he hadn't seen before, a circle with a smaller circle inside, connected by a thin line. It looked like an eye, not a human eye. Something older. Something that didn't blink. The recorder clicked again. It's watching. The lights cut out. Ethan stumbled back, unable to see anything. The darkness swallowed him whole, erasing the edges of the room. He reached for the recorder, but his fingers brushed empty air. The ground beneath him vibrated with a low hum, like something enormous was waking up beneath the floorboards. Then, faster than the lights could return, a whisper filled the room. Not behind him. Not from the recorder. All around him. You open it. A sudden burst of light exploded from the wall, forcing Ethan to shield his eyes. When he looked again, the symbols were no longer symbols. They had opened into a kind of window, a shimmering surface showing something he couldn't understand. It wasn't another room. It wasn't the hallway. It was movement. Shapes shifting like reflections in trembling water. Long, stretched silhouettes that looked too thin to be human. The eye-shaped mark pulsed again. The door behind him burst open with a deafening crash. Ethan spun around just in time to see the shadow from the hallway pour into the room like it was made of smoke and bone. It stretched, leaned, and twisted toward him, its shape bending in ways his mind struggled to process. He backed into the glowing wall, his hand brushing the warm edge of the spiral. The shadow lunged, and the wall swallowed him. For a moment, Ethan felt like he was falling through thick fog, his breath ripped away by weightless air. The sounds of the hallway, the recorder, the pounding, all vanished. He landed hard on something solid, the impact knocking the wind from his chest. He gasped and looked around. He wasn't in the school anymore, or not in the part he knew. He stood in a vast, empty version of the same room, same floor, same walls, but everything was faded, like it had been abandoned for centuries. Dust coated the surfaces. The symbols were dull and lifeless. The door hung crooked on its hinges. and the air felt colder, thinner. A faint voice echoed behind him. "You shouldn't be here." Ethan turned. The caretaker, the one everyone thought was missing, stood in the corner. His clothes were the same as in the old security footage, but he looked exhausted, like he had been trapped in this place for days or weeks. Maybe longer. Ethan's heart raced. "Where are we?" The caretaker shook his head slowly. "Not where. When." Ethan froze. The caretaker stepped closer, his expression heavy with warning. "This place keeps copies of moments. Loops of time. Echoes. You followed the symbols, didn't you? Just like I did." Ethan swallowed hard. "How do we get out?" The caretaker glanced at the dimmed symbols on the wall. "You have to close what you opened before it finds a way to cross over permanently." Ethan felt his chest tighten. "What is it?" The caretaker looked toward the cracked doorway, fear tightening his jaw. "Not a person. Not a ghost. Something that lives between the seconds. It found me, and now it's found you." A low, rumbling growl echoed from the hallway of this strange reflection world. Ethan felt the hair on his arms rise. The caretaker whispered urgently, "You still have a chance. You came in at the right moment. You can undo it." Ethan moved toward the symbols, but as he reached out, they sparked weakly, refusing to react. The caretaker swallowed. "You have to show it the truth." Ethan frowned. "What truth?" The caretaker pointed at him. "Why it was drawn to you." Before Ethan could question him again, a tall shadow slid into the doorway, distorted, flickering like a broken frame of footage. Its long limbs stretched outward, searching. The caretaker backed away, voice trembling. "You brought something with you. Something it's been waiting for." The shadow leaned forward. Ethan stepped toward the symbols. The shadow lunged, and the wall began to glow once more, brighter than before, pulsing in rhythm with Ethan's heartbeat, as if responding to something inside him rather than the markings around him. The caretaker shouted, "Now, whatever you're hiding, show it." Ethan took a deep breath, and everything went white. The floor, the walls, the shadow, the caretaker, gone. In the blinding light, a final voice echoed, calm and steady. "You didn't see the whole truth at 3:13 a.m. Then everything snapped into darkness, and Ethan woke up on the hallway floor of the real school. But the symbols were still glowing, and his phone was no longer dead. A new file had appeared on the screen, stamped with the same time, 3:13 a.m., and below it, a title he had never recorded, "Play Me Before It Returns." The twist ends here, ready for the final ending or an epilogue if you want it. Ethan lay on the cold floor, staring at the glowing symbols like they were the last pieces of a puzzle he had almost solved but couldn't fully understand. His chest rose and fell in sharp breaths as he pushed himself upright, wincing at the dull ache running down his spine. The real school hallway stretched around him, silent, dim, but familiar. No endless echo of time. No collapsing doorway. No shifting creature blending with the walls. For a moment, he wondered if everything that happened had been some kind of hallucination brought on by exhaustion and fear. But the symbols still pulsed faintly, giving off the same soft glow he had seen in the other version of the room. They were real, and so was the new file on his phone. The title on the screen, "Play Me Before It Returns," made his stomach clench. He didn't want to play it. Every instinct screamed that pressing play would drag him back into something he barely escaped from. But he also knew the caretaker's warning wasn't just noise. Whatever he encountered wasn't gone. It was waiting. And if he didn't understand the truth it wanted, it could come back. He took a slow breath, leaned against the wall for support, and tapped the file. The screen flickered before the video opened. For a moment, the footage was pitch black, and Ethan thought it might be corrupted. Then, an image appeared, grainy, low resolution, like security camera footage. The timestamp in the corner read 3:13 a.m., but it wasn't from tonight. It was from years ago. The scene showed the same hallway, only freshly painted, brighter, and alive with fluorescent lights. Students' projects lined the walls. The building didn't look abandoned yet, and a younger version of Ethan stood near the classroom door. He felt his entire body stiffen. He blinked at the screen, confused. He didn't remember this. He didn't remember ever being in the school at night when he was younger. The Ethan on screen looked maybe 12 or 13, standing alone, rubbing his eyes like he had just woken from a bad dream. Then another figure entered the frame. The caretaker, but younger too. He walked toward the kid version of Ethan with a flashlight, his posture careful and concerned. The audio crackled to life. "Did you hear it again?" the caretaker asked softly. The younger Ethan nodded, looking scared. The whispering. Ethan's breath caught. He had no memory of this. Not even a hint of a memory. But the boy on screen wasn't lying. His expression was too real, too raw. The caretaker crouched to eye level. "You did the right thing coming to get me. But you can't follow the sound. It tries to lead you." The boy whispered, "Is it stuck?" The caretaker hesitated. "Something like that." The hallway lights flickered on screen. The camera shook slightly. And behind the boy, just for a second, a long shadow stretched across the tiles. Not approaching, just watching. Ethan's throat tightened. The caretaker noticed it too. He stood quickly, stepping between the boy and the shadow, blocking the camera's view. The video glitched, static filling the screen for a moment. When the image returned, the hallway was empty. The boy and caretaker were gone. The video cut to a new angle. A classroom. The same classroom Ethan had explored earlier. The younger version of the caretaker stood at the board, drawing the symbols. Not randomly, not out of fear. Carefully, methodically, with intention. A younger Ethan sat on the floor beside him, tracing smaller symbols in chalk. Ethan's pulse hammered. He tried to piece together why he couldn't remember any of this. Why those symbols felt familiar in a way he couldn't define. The caretaker in the video spoke again. "You can hear it more clearly than the others. That's why it follows you." The boy asked, "Why me?" The caretaker paused. "Because you don't close your mind to the quiet things." Ethan paused the video, breathing deeply. His younger self had been connected to this long before he ever decided to investigate the abandoned school. Whatever lived in that space between seconds had found him years ago. And maybe he had buried the memory to protect himself. He pressed play again. The caretaker stood and wiped dust from his hands. "You must promise me something. If you ever hear it again, don't go alone. And don't let it trick you. It doesn't fully understand us, but it learns." The boy nodded. The camera glitched again, as if something brushed against it. The final shot was of the caretaker turning off the classroom lights. As the room dimmed, the symbols on the wall glowed faintly, just like tonight. The caretaker's voice came through the crackling audio one last time. "If it ever crosses over completely, it won't be looking for a place." The camera froze. "It will be looking for you." The video ended. Ethan lowered the phone slowly, his chest tight. Everything that happened tonight suddenly made sense. The creature hadn't just been wandering the building. It wasn't looking for anyone. It had been searching for him because it remembered him. Because he had heard it before. Because the symbols weren't warnings. They were protections he no longer understood. He stood shakily, wiping his sweaty palms on his shirt. The hallway was quiet again, the symbols fading until they vanished completely. The school felt empty, but no longer hostile. It felt like it was finally letting him go. He walked toward the exit, glancing back only once. The hallway behind him felt different, almost peaceful. The shadows didn't shift. The lights didn't flicker. For the first time since he stepped inside, everything felt still. As he stepped out into the cold night air, he inhaled deeply, grounding himself. The sky was just beginning to lighten, hints of dawn spreading across the horizon. The world outside felt real in a way the building never had. He checked his phone again. The video file was gone. Erased. No trace of it left. Part of him was relieved. Another part wished he could watch it again, not to scare himself, but to understand the truth he had forgotten so long ago. He walked across the parking lot, feeling the weight of the night settle into something softer. Acceptance, maybe. Closure. Whatever had happened between him and that strange presence wasn't finished, but it wasn't chasing him anymore. Not tonight. As he reached his car, he noticed something on the windshield. A small piece of old, faded chalk. He picked it up, turning it over in his hand. Not a threat. Not a warning. Just a reminder. A quiet message that he wasn't imagining the connection. That some truths follow you even when you forget them. He placed the chalk in his pocket and looked back at the dark silhouette of the school one last time. Whatever lived behind those symbols, whatever watched from the edge of the hallway shadows, had retreated again. Maybe because he finally understood the history he kept locked away. Maybe because, as the caretaker said, it still didn't fully understand people like him. Either way, the night was over. He got into his car, started the engine, and drove away, the first rays of sunrise glinting off his windshield. The abandoned school faded in the rearview mirror, becoming just another shape in the dim light. But Ethan knew, deep down, that not everything was erased. Some things stay with you. Some stories continue in the quiet. And some moments, like the strange footage recorded at 3:13 a.m., are never truly forgotten, no matter how much time passes. He didn't look back again. He didn't need to. The shadows behind him stayed still.